Have you ever thought that investigative agencies are just doing their job? Well, hold that thought, because the reality might shock you. These agencies may not hesitate to throw Trump's advisors under the bus if they don't follow orders. But have you ever wondered what secrets about Trump that no one wants to know might be revealed by these very investigative agencies? Stick around for today's video, as we uncover a shocking truth about him that might make a lot of people hang their heads in shame. Get ready for things you never imagined could happen in a political landscape that is far more complex than we usually see. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Investigative agencies are supposed to protect the truth, serve justice, and make sure things are above board. But what if these agencies are more than just neutral players in the system? What if they're willing to go the extra mile and throw people, especially Trump's closest allies, under the bus if it benefits them or serves their own interests? Imagine this: secretive agencies may have dirt on Trump's administration that could leave his advisors scrambling to defend themselves. Even the most trusted advisors may find themselves in trouble if the stakes are high enough. And what happens when those advisors are caught between loyalty to Trump and the threat of losing it all? The political world is full of power plays, secret deals, and strategies that are often not seen by the public. But behind the scenes, investigations are taking place. They aren't just probing into everyday scandals, they are digging into the biggest, most controversial issues of the day. And sometimes, when those investigations get too close to the people in charge, the loyalty of those closest to Trump may be put to the test. These are not just simple questions of political maneuvering, they could involve major revelations about how decisions were made, who was really pulling the strings, and whether or not Trump's advisors might throw him under the bus to save themselves. That's the question we need to answer. Will they, or won't they? We've seen how investigative agencies are portrayed as the gatekeepers of justice. But what if they aren't just working from an ethical standpoint? What if, behind the scenes, they're actively using their power to manipulate the game, shifting alliances to benefit themselves? What if they've known about secrets so deep that they're now prepared to expose them for their own gain? The idea of investigative agencies selling out Trump's advisors might sound dramatic, but let's take a deeper look at the reality. If you think agencies like the FBI or CIA are just about following the law, think again. The truth is, power can be an intoxicating thing. It can drive people to make choices that aren't always in the best interest of the nation or even the truth. These agencies have their own agendas, and they will use whatever they can to maintain their influence in Washington. But what happens when those advisors get caught in the crossfire? Trump's closest allies may not be as safe as they think. Let's be real for a second. In politics, if you're not on the same page with the people who hold the power, those behind the scenes pulling strings, the consequences can be severe. Advisors may have walked into a game they weren't prepared to play, trusting their position and their relationship with Trump to keep them safe. But that's not always how things work. If Trump's advisors find themselves standing in the way of something larger, whether it's the public's trust, political maneuvering, or a major investigation, they might not have the safety net they thought they did. These agencies can't just sit back and let things slide if they don't agree with what's going on. They're looking for leverage. If an advisor knows something that could bring down Trump's administration, or worse, if they've crossed lines they shouldn't have, those advisors could quickly find themselves in the spotlight, forced to make choices they weren't expecting. The question is, how far will these agencies go to make sure they maintain power? If it means exposing the very people they've been protecting for years, will they do it? Now let's focus on Trump's most trusted advisors. These are the people who have been behind closed doors with him during some of the most critical decisions. They've stood by his side through thick and thin, but now, they might be facing a situation where their loyalty to Trump could cost them dearly. When an investigation begins, everyone has to choose a side. Advisors who are so deeply connected to the decisions being made may find themselves in the crosshairs of an investigation that they never saw coming. And what happens when you're the one being investigated? Well, suddenly, loyalty becomes a far less important factor. Investigative agencies don't always care about loyalty. They care about truth, and sometimes, they care about something else: power. Advisors to Trump may have thought they were untouchable, but as investigations unfold, they might realize that they are now expendable. If these advisors don't cooperate, they will become the first to be blamed, the first to be thrown under the bus. It's not a question of whether they'll face consequences, it's a question of when. The deeper these investigations go, the more secrets they will uncover, and the more pressure there will be on these advisors to reveal information. What happens if an advisor has information that could damage the entire administration? Will they stay loyal, or will they flip to protect themselves? These advisors will have to weigh their options carefully. If they don't cooperate, they might face charges that could ruin their careers, their reputations, and their freedom. So, do they continue to stand by Trump, or do they cooperate with the investigators and throw him under the bus? It's a very difficult decision. But remember, in politics, the stakes are higher than you can imagine. And when push comes to shove, people will do whatever it takes to survive. So what truths could these investigative agencies be uncovering? Let's start with the most shocking one. As investigations continue, we may discover that many of the decisions Trump has made over the years were not entirely his own. The advisors he trusted were the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes, directing policy, making decisions without his knowledge, or in some cases, against his will. What does that mean for Trump's reputation? And what does it mean for his advisors? Here's a potential example. It's been rumored that Trump's advisors played a more significant role than we ever realized in pushing policies that favored corporations they were personally linked to. These decisions weren't just about making America great, they were about lining the pockets of wealthy elites. In fact, many of the political moves that Trump made could have been influenced by the very people who were supposed to be giving him advice, not making the decisions themselves. Investigators are already looking into the relationships between Trump's advisors and powerful business interests. The question is, how far back do these connections go, and what did these advisors know? This is the type of scandal that could shake the political foundation of Trump's entire presidency. But if you think this is just speculation, think again. Investigative agencies have a way of piecing together evidence from unlikely sources, and soon, all these secrets could come to light. With all this going on, the question is, who will win the battle? Will Trump's advisors hold strong, or will the investigative agencies have the power to bring them down? Will the advisors choose to protect their own interests, or will they risk it all to defend the president? It's a battle of survival in the world of politics, and no one is safe. The key thing to remember is that in politics, no one is untouchable. The truth, no matter how uncomfortable, will eventually come to light. And while advisors may think they can protect themselves by staying close to Trump, they may soon realize that they are in a far more precarious position than they thought. The pressure to reveal secrets, the weight of investigations, and the threat of exposure may push these advisors into a corner where their only option is to spill the beans. Let's think about this. These advisors are not just fighting for their positions, they are fighting for their future. And if they don't cooperate with the investigation, they'll have to deal with the consequences. At this point, loyalty to Trump may not be enough to keep them out of trouble. The reality is, the more involved these advisors are in Trump's political decisions, the harder it will be for them to walk away unscathed. As more truths about Trump's presidency are unveiled, we begin to see that the political game is far from over. The things we think we know are just the surface. There are layers upon layers of decisions, influences, and alliances that have yet to be revealed. So, the question is, how will the public react when the full scope of these truths comes to light? Will it spark a revolution? Will people rise up and demand answers? Or will it create a new power structure, with political insiders manipulating the information for their own gain? We've seen how investigations can completely shake the political landscape. A small leak here, a secret document there, and suddenly, everything shifts. The very people who seemed untouchable might be exposed. But here's the kicker, sometimes, the people who are exposed aren't the ones who made the biggest decisions. Often, it's the advisors, the ones operating in the background, who become the scapegoats. Trump's advisors have been the key players in shaping many of his policies, yet they're the ones most at risk of being thrown under the bus. Why? Because when the chips are down, it's often the people who are closest to the action that end up taking the fall. The higher the stakes, the more vulnerable you become. Let's talk about the loyalty factor here. Trump's administration has always prided itself on loyalty, yet in a world where loyalty can be your greatest strength or your biggest weakness, how far can it carry you? If the moment comes when Trump's advisors have to make a choice between their loyalty to him and their personal survival, what will they choose? It's a tricky situation because the game isn't just about being on the winning team anymore, it's about playing the long game. And if you're not on the right side when the truth comes to light, you could lose everything. This is where the revolution comes in. When truths are finally exposed, it doesn't just shake the foundations of a single administration. It could shake the entire political system to its core. We've seen the power of public opinion before. It can topple governments, create movements, and shift the tides of elections. This could be the moment when the people, having been kept in the dark for so long, finally begin to understand the full scope of the political maneuvering that has taken place. But will they act? Will they demand accountability for all the actions that have led to this point? Will the public begin to question the very institutions that have long kept them in the dark? Or will this just be another cycle, where the public feels betrayed, but ultimately does nothing? The way the truth is revealed could change everything, but it's the reaction of the people that will determine whether this is just another political scandal or the start of something much bigger. This moment is about more than just Trump or his advisors. It's about the system itself, the political game that has been played for so long without transparency. People want to know what has really been happening behind closed doors. If these truths come to light, it could signal the end of one era and the beginning of a new political landscape. But the real question is, how will Trump's advisors respond when their loyalty to him no longer guarantees their safety? If the investigators keep digging, they may find a whole web of interconnections between Trump's closest allies and powerful figures outside of politics, corporations, business tycoons, international figures. The more these secrets get unearthed, the more these advisors will find themselves in a position where their loyalty to Trump no longer makes sense. Will they stick with him? Or will they be forced to turn their backs on the very person who once gave them power? But what happens if Trump's advisors choose to betray him first? Imagine the chaos that could erupt. The moment that these advisors start turning on one another, it's not just a political scandal, it's a full-scale revolution. The people will want answers, and the pressure will mount on every side. Trump may find himself fighting not just for his presidency, but for his legacy. There's also a deeper issue at play, the erosion of trust. When people lose faith in their leaders, everything begins to unravel. The public's disillusionment could reach a point where no politician can survive. We've seen this happen in history before, and we're about to witness a similar turning point. The question is, who will rise from the ashes of this political upheaval? Will it be Trump, who finds a way to pull through and retain power, or will his advisors, in their desperate scramble to save themselves, expose everything and bring about a new wave of political reform? Let's not kid ourselves here. In a time of crisis, people will do whatever it takes to protect themselves. They'll turn on their friends, they'll make deals with their enemies, and they'll betray anyone who stands in their way. And in a political system like ours, where everyone is looking for leverage, where there are no real heroes or villains, only people with power, what happens next will be determined by those who are bold enough to act first. One thing is certain, the political revolution that could follow these revelations will be far more intense and unpredictable than anything we've seen before. It's not just about exposing corruption or secrets, it's about uncovering a system that has been built on lies, manipulation, and power plays. And once the people begin to understand the full scope of what's been going on, they may not stop at just calling for accountability. They might demand change, a complete overhaul of the system that has allowed this kind of political maneuvering to thrive. So, after everything you've heard, you might be sitting there thinking, wait a minute. Did any of that really happen? And here's the thing, none of it did. The truth is, what you've been hearing in this video was all a made-up story. Yes, everything I just said was part of a dramatic, fictional scenario designed to illustrate how things could unfold in the world of politics. You were led to believe that investigative agencies were about to expose all of Trump's advisors, and that's not true. But let's take a moment to reflect on why this story, even though it was completely fabricated, still has some real relevance. First of all, we need to talk about why we're so quick to believe these types of stories. Why does it feel so believable that investigative agencies could throw Trump's advisors under the bus? The reality is, it's because it taps into something we all know: power can be dangerous, and it can lead to all sorts of backstabbing, scheming, and betrayal. Politicians aren't immune to that. We've seen it time and time again in history. The idea of a powerful figure like Trump being surrounded by advisors who would betray him to protect themselves is an easy story to believe because it reflects the patterns we've seen in other political scandals. But now, let's take a step back and think about the real-world mechanics of politics. When it comes to investigations, things aren't as simple as they appear on TV or in the movies. Political investigations are far more complex. They follow strict legal processes, and every decision made has to be backed up by solid evidence. Investigators don't just expose secrets because they feel like it, they have to build cases that are legally sound and airtight. So the idea that Trump's advisors could easily be thrown under the bus isn't as simple as it seems. For example, every investigation into Trump's administration has taken years of research, documentation, and legal wrangling. No matter how powerful the pressure to expose corruption might be, it doesn't happen overnight. There are checks and balances, there are layers of bureaucracy, and there are legal safeguards in place to make sure that any evidence uncovered is handled properly. So, while it's fun to imagine a world where secrets are exposed and everyone turns on each other, the reality is much more complicated. But here's the thing, while the story we just told you was fictional, it still reflects an underlying truth about the nature of politics. The political system we have in place is far from perfect. It's prone to corruption, to power struggles, to manipulation. And the more power one has, the more likely it is that their secrets will eventually come to light. It's not that the advisors are going to be sold out, it's that in politics, no one is truly untouchable. And let's not forget about the role of the public in all of this. We, as citizens, are sometimes too quick to assume that our leaders are all-powerful, that they are in control of everything, and that nothing can shake their positions. But what we've learned from history is that power is fragile. It can be lost in an instant. It's one thing for the public to be shocked by a scandal, it's another thing for them to actively demand accountability. And that's where things get really interesting. The real power in politics doesn't lie with the politicians or the advisors, it lies with the people. We are the ones who shape the narrative, who determine whether a scandal becomes a movement or just another story that fades into the background. When we start questioning the system, when we start demanding answers, that's when real change happens. But we have to be careful. In a world where the truth is often hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and legalese, we need to keep questioning, keep searching for answers.